Okay, so this video is literally just gonna be all about camera basics. When I was a young teenager and I first picked up my first DSLR, I didn't take any classes, I didn't go to school for it. I was homeschooled, so obviously I didn't take any classes in my school about it. I just learned it from this guy who taught me. And so I also realized that there's not a lot of videos out there, unless you're like a super camera nerd, that are gonna teach you the basics of how a camera works. Basically, pictures are interpretations of light. That's how you want to think about it. So there are different aspects of a photo that you can manipulate to make them work however you want them to. The basic elements of a picture as seen through a camera is your shutter speed, your aperture, and your ISO. Those three things will completely and radically change your image for the better or for the worse. And if you don't know what they are and what they do, then every single image you take probably won't be the best that you could possibly get. So let's start with shutter speed. Your shutter is what opens up and lets light into your sensor. So your shutter speed is how fast that shutter is actually opening up and closing again. So it determines how much light is let in. Now, where this can be manipulated is, in really high light situations outside, sports photography, nature photography, things like that. You're gonna want a really fast shutter speed so it doesn't let a lot in, right? Because the longer that shutter is open, longer those doors are open, the more light that pours into your sensor and makes your image brighter. So for really bright situations, you want it to be shorter. For really dark situations, you can make that image brighter by leaving that shutter open for longer. However, as you can imagine, that causes complications, right? So if you're taking pictures of things that are moving that you want to freeze in that motion, if you have a long shutter speed, it's going to get you a really blurry image. So you can manipulate that, but moving it longer will make your image brighter, but that's not always what you want to do. Okay, the other aspect is your aperture. Aperture is literally just a setting that changes how big that shutter is, right? Some lenses can only open so much. The one I'm shooting right now is a 17 to 40 millimeter f4. That's Canon's, it's a USM lens, it's a great lens, but it's pretty dark, right? I have other lenses like my 51.2 and my 80.1.4, or my 85.1.4. Those lenses open up really, really wide and let a lot of light in. This lens does not let a lot of light into it. Now, where that can be manipulated and change your image and all the things that it changes is not only the amount of light that lets in, but it's also the difference between your subject and your background, right? And how blurry your background is going to be, whatever's out of focus is going to be. So if you have a very low aperture number, a 1.2, 1.4, 1.8, 2.5, something like that, then you're gonna have a very blurry background. But as you can see from this image right now, I'm pretty close. I'm probably about a foot away from this lens at 17 millimeters on a full frame, but my background is not that blurry. Why? Because I'm at f4. And the third aspect is your ISO. Couldn't tell you what it stands for. I have no idea. ISO means how sensitive your sensor is to light coming into it. Now, on a lot of really low-end cameras, you cannot change your ISO settings above 400 ISO or you get a ton of grain in your image. Right now, I am at 1000 ISO on my 1DX Mark II, and it still looks really good. There's an aspect of ISO that changes your image from better to worse. You can get more light, right? So you can make a really high shutter speed and crank your ISO, and you will freeze that motion in time with that image. Excuse me. Okay, stop. Everything about photography is about a balance, right? Everything has a give and everything has a take. So with ISO, the higher that ISO number, the more grain you're gonna introduce into your image, right? If we cranked our ISO as high as we could, that image is gonna be really grainy. And if you own a DSLR, you know that full well. So my encouragement to everybody who's learning how to use a camera, who bought their first DSLR, or maybe you just got an app on your phone that you can manually change the settings in your phone. Experiment with them. But remember, your three essential settings are going to be shutter, ISO, and aperture. But you want to manipulate those aspects to get the best image. Don't always throw away images because they're not perfect, but learn to use everything that your camera can do manually before you move on to anything else, right? The worst thing you could possibly do is to lock that, T8 or T7 or whatever they're on, your Rebel series camera on auto and never change from that. You will never learn, you will never grow, you will always be just some person pointing and shooting. But change it into manual and see what you can pull off with that. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please subscribe, drop a like, interact with this video. It helps a lot. Check out my other ones. Hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.